A very fine good evening to one and all. Now, we have the special lecture on Challenges of 21st Century Warfare for India with special focus on technology. The session will be chaired by Mr. S. Raghotham, and the keynote speaker for today's special lecture is Lieutenant General Arun Kumar Sahni. I request the chair and the keynote speaker to take over the dais. Mr. S. Raghotham is a journalist, strategic analyst, and editorial manager with over 2 decades of experience in newspapers, online media, and think tanks. The keynote speaker for today's session is Lieutenant General Arun Kumar Sahni, Param Vishish Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Sena Medal, Vishish Seva Medal. Is the former General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Southwestern Command of the Indian Army. He has extensive operational experience in India and abroad. A regular speaker at various forums, he is also a distinguished fellow with prestigious think tanks in India. He is also presently mentoring startups in cyber, AI, and robotics. Now, I hand over the session to the chair. Over to you, sir.
Good evening. I think the organizers have done well to save the best for the last. For me, it's a pleasure to be back in Manipal at Mahe and for such an important conference. I would like to thank Dr. Sheshadri Chari for inviting me here, Dr. Anand and Mahe, and the Institute of Chinese Studies for this opportunity. Thank you. Actually, my speech has been stolen by a speaker from the previous session, Hima Bindu. But, well, I'll still regurgitate it because I can't be accused of plagiarism. I'm not an academic. There was a time when we unthinkingly reeled out Clausewitzian wisdom that war is politics by other means, or it's de Gaullean inversion saying politics is war by other means. Today we talk of war by all means and politics, including international politics, by all means. I think it will be foolhardy on my part to expand it to this audience when we have such a distinguished general here by our side. So I will yield the stage to the general so he can speak at length and we can have some question time as well. Thank you. General, over to you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be at this fantastic premises of Mahe. I think I've never been here, and for that I have to really profusely thank Dr. Chari for having invited me from the China Study Center to join in. And I didn't know by default that I would also be participating in the 17th AICCS. So thank you, ma'am, for also by default extending that invitation to me to come and speak today. I have to also place on record my thanks to the Vice Chancellor, General Venkatesh. I think an absolutely fantastic setup, and it was a pleasure to meet him this morning and hear him give his opening remarks for the start of this conference. And most importantly, whom I shouldn't forget, a colleague who'd been with us, looking after us, and Amrita Jesh, who was in clause, where I did dabble around post-retirement and keep going there regularly as a distinguished fellow, for having done up all the granular tying up to make sure that I reach here flawlessly and have a very comfortable stay. Thank you, everyone. And I have to firstly thank all the students of this great institution, because if I was a student in this era, I think I would have collapsed by now. I think the kind of action that has been going on, the kind of information, the kind of I would say experiential knowledge that has been shared by various people and by the academics has been fantastic. It's an overload, but I still see that people are wide awake and conscious. And the second thing which I noticed, which is very surprising, is that in the space of military technology and anything to do with warfare, I think women are more, the gender bias is more towards women than the guys, which is surprising again, but which is good. And thank God the Indian Army opened up its doors to the ladies. Otherwise, we would have been told for, or held out for gender biases in our activity. So starting with that, let me first start by saying that it's a very topical, a very relevant subject, and I think today I will talk about how the security paradigm has changed, these challenges to 21st century warfare for India, with special focus on issues of technology, which have got weaved into this whole story, has made the challenges for organizations and especially for the Indian Armed Forces extremely complex. But before I share that, I must also share with you something which I'd always remembered. I thought it's very apt here. I was told when Albert Einstein was in the college, and after one of the exams that got over, he was walking and he asked one of the students, "So how was the paper today?" He says, "Sir, the questions were the same." He says, "Yes, but the times have changed, so the answers are different." So that's what happens with warfare. The nature of warfare doesn't change. The character of warfare changes. So the methodologies of how you execute it as generals, as soldiers, as a nation state is what changes. And that's the, I would say, the umbilical linkage between the past practices and what you now trained to be able to meet. So I think a process of change, a process of evolution in your thought process is something which is a continuum for all armed forces across the world. So let me start by stating what everybody's been saying. Undoubtedly, the world is rapidly and fundamentally under transition. There are long-term shifts in the balance of global economic and military power. The geostrategic landscape is witnessing new alignments and realignments, and we've heard a lot about it since the morning, starting off from the inaugural session, how things are changing. There are emergence of more powerful non-state actors. I mean, we'd had the Al-Qaeda, we had the ISIS, but then you don't know what is happening. Is the Boko Haram growing bigger? Is there still the eminence of something of the AICCS still floating around, the Khorasan, the Caliphate? So you've got these non-state actors who've actually become a dominant force and changed the threat spectrum. You've got the militarization of cyber and space, the global commons, and now latest is the Arctic. I mean, look at how China is wanting to buy space, how to control space, and if there is going to be a climate change impact, you suddenly have a different horizon and a different window of threat which is emanating out in the strategic landscape. So things are changing. So, but what is absolutely obvious is that there is an increase in the scale, diversity, and the complexity of the future warfare. And that is what is will have to be looked at by military strategic analysts, military leadership, people who are the mandarins of the security domain. I think along with this, what has happened is the safety and security of the nation and its citizens can now be marginalized without crossing national borders, with anonymity and deniability. We saw that, I think, the first use of cyberspace was when Estonia was made to crumble with the DDoS attacks in 2007. You suddenly achieved political objectives and aims without having to fire a single shot. So you have these non-contact means which are coming into play, which have to be looked at, and because they are non-contact, it has also diffused the space between the military and the non-military space. So today, when you say it's an all-of-nation approach to look at the security of a nation, it is because it's the all-of-nation which is under threat when there are two neighbors or through conflicting states who come into play. And that was what was happening with China. I think we've seen a bit of it in bits and pieces since 2020, and the actions that we initiated within India to try and rectify that challenge. But before I go into the granular level, I thought I must share with you how has this security landscape changed. And that's where I think it's important. I took that opportunity only because I know there are a large number of young students who are in this space who are starting off. So as you're aware, the Treaty of Westphalia decided that the sovereignty of a nation was linked to the defense and security of a nation. So land borders became very essential. You suddenly had the end of Second World War. And you had a gentleman called Walter Lippmann, who actually was one of the policymakers in the US Department, who said, sorry, security is also the safety and the protection of your core values. And that's why how it emanated, that does democratic norms need to be pushed. So there was a space that was created where you had an ideological war against what was being propagated by then the Warsaw Pact countries. And then you finally had Robert McNamara in 1968. He called about the essence of security, that a paper that he had written. And what did he do? He transgressed security from the state to the citizen, from the state to human security. And now when you look at human security, it's water, it's food, it's energy, it's everything. So that's how this whole gambit of security has changed. So today when you look at a national security policy, it has nothing to do with just looking at the border defense of India and Pakistan or India-China. It actually looks at all these other facets. And that's why the security or the threat spectrum has changed for the 21st century warfare, where not only the armed forces, but all others will also have to be prepared to be able to be instruments who can make a difference as far as the security of the nation is concerned. But in India, so we have India, there is a certain amount of predictability. We've got two neighbors, India, China and Pakistan. We've got historical anomalies, we carry historical baggages which are related to our borders, and I don't see that going away in the foreseeable future. So even if it's a 21st century warfare, with the changes in technology in the conventional spectrum, we will have to be ready to protect our borders. So the boundaries, the sovereignty of our borders will still remain relevant and an action for which you will have to be prepared. And the Russia-Ukraine war has proved that sovereignty, territorial borders, security and sovereignty is an issue which requires a kinetic engagement, which requires classical conventional war. So that capability will have to be retained by the Indian Army, if not honed with the changing methodology of character of war being changed. But I think the other issue that we will have to see is that maybe the threat from Pakistan will diminish as the asymmetry changes. But our primary threat will always remain China, and that is what we should be prepared for. So if I have to look at what are those critical 21st century challenges, I have put 10 basic heads under which I can look at them in the threat spectrum. The first one, which undoubtedly goes with the geostrategic landscape. The flux in that has creating dynamics which are different for the armed forces to look at it. Just to give an idea, if today India has to become a middle income power, we are wanting to be the preferred security provider in the Indian Ocean region, we require to have capabilities that will require us to be able to operate outside. If we require to operate outside, we would require the wherewithal, the capacity and the capability to be able to execute these tasks. So that is the growth that is happening when you see the geopolitical flux. And I would say there are 3 or 4 things that have happened. Geoeconomics, hyper-nationalism and polarization. It has created fissures in stable socio-political environments that existed earlier. There is a strategic competition, China, USA, that's one of the issues. It has led to new alignments and realignments or new alignments. You've looked at the AUKUS, you look at Quad, you look at the trade partnership. So you've got this whole spectrum where you are seeing certain amount of problems coming up. So you don't know if you're friends today or what tomorrow. It's like Bangladesh. We've had the golden period of relationship, but today we are again going through a phase where that anti-India sentiment is so pronounced. I just got back 3 days back from there. And the younger generation has got such an angst about it that they felt that India's relationship was with the Prime Minister of the country. She forgets, that's what we try to sort of espouse, that leaderships having close bonds ensures things happen faster. When they happen faster, it happens for the people. And we're providing 40 megawatts of power, the Petropol thing, and it's always because of our neighborhood first policy, it is not looking at, it's non-reciprocal. So it took a lot of effort, but as I said, suddenly we've got a problem. Today's news media elements and some cargo has landed up from Pakistan for the first time in the shores of Bangladesh. Is there a problem of the ISI? The DGFI always had a little bit of a linkage with the ISI. We've got problems happening in our own backyard in Manipur. Is it going to get exploited by Pakistan and by China? Are you seeing the problem? So this dynamics is something which we will have to be prepared for. Changing of the political realm and the regime in Bangladesh has created a threat perception and a threat vector which was a few years back not existing, or had diminished to a point that it was not really a major issue. So that's why this becomes important. And I think the biggest problem is that the primacy of location of India. I think we used to say that Pakistan always exploited the fact with the Taliban, the Afghanistan and that area that it was, as they said, the frontline state. It happens so that the geography of ours is such that we dominate the Indian Ocean and the linkages to the Indo-Pacific, and that itself has become a bone of contention as far as China is concerned. And with the current kind of thing, it will remain a pinprick which will keep getting enticed to ensure, because he does not understand what is strategic autonomy, and we feel that we are strategically balanced, and we haven't allowed the Quad to really emanate into a military alliance. We've said it's with the 7 verticals, if you look at it, it's for better resilience and for better governance and for better execution of the challenges which are being faced by the neighborhood and the countries who are part of that alliance. I think the most important that comes in will be the changing character of war. And this changing character of war is due to, which is the second bullet point that I like to say, the innovative and disruptive technological developments, undoubtedly. You don't have to go too far. You look at the Russia-Ukraine war, it's showing you suddenly had these swarm drones that came in by the Houthis and came and hit the oil tanks in Saudi Arabia, and they suddenly was a swarm drone, so you knocked one, the other took command, and it happened. So you suddenly have this innovative and disruptive technologies which has created this challenge. We had across the border today drugs being dropped, weapons being dropped from Pakistan across the barriers that we have created. You suddenly had Jammu airport getting a shot being hit on top of it. So you've got challenges which are coming up thanks to the technology which needs to be addressed. The second thing is the militarization of cyber and space, which I talked about. I'll talk more about it separately. Just that, yes, the cyber connectivity, this digital connectivity, the digital age that you and I are today, this reliance on, I mean, today I think the most important thing that I carry is not my wallet, but my telephone. Yeah. If I lose my mobile phone, I think the world will come to an end because everything is connected to that. My bank accounts, my numbers, my contacts, my lifestyle, and everything is linked there, my connectivity with people, information that I'm sharing and getting. So I think there is a major issue that is happening in this cyber and space. And the last bit is this emergence of non-state actors and this hybrid warfare that has come in. And as you see, we live in a very, very violent and in an element of VUCA, but our neighborhood is really not the best when you look towards the west or whether you look towards the east from here. Though we are reaching out on both sides, there is disruptions in South Asia, Afghanistan, West Asia. There are problems that are happening. You've got the Gaza, the Israeli thing that is happening out there. And so a threat of radicalism, terrorism, and extremism is something which will remain omnipresent as far as we are concerned. Because you're still a growing nation, 1.4 billion, it's very difficult that in this development phase there are people who would feel that they have not been given their due, so they would be always open to outside influences. And cyber and the domain makes it that much more compact, more critical. So if I look at the impact of technology, let me just quickly say, conventional platforms, they become more lethal, they have become longer range, and there's pinpoint accuracy. When I look at these new age platforms, the unmanned surface vehicles, the unmanned underwater surface vessels that have come to port, the UAVs, the RPAs, loiter munitions, swarm drones, and today I was just talking to Abhimanyu, who was just mentioning about it. He's gone into a different space with his robotic and making these lethal autonomous weapons which will come into play in a very different dimension that can happen. So this ever-evolving period is creating challenges, and today, thanks to the development of reducing of latency, increased bandwidth, and the speed of communication, IoT and connectivity is actually gaining precedence and stability to be able to be exploited by the people who want to exploit it with the wrong reasons. On the other space, you have the AI machine, the logarithmic warfare, which is coming in. It is helping you both for predictive analysis, but it's also making and honing the ISR, the intelligent the surveillance and reconnaissance space, very, very competitive, very, very forward-looking, and literally it's created transparency during day, so it's not a day and night battle. There is all-round transparency available with the help of this. And when you come into the area of AR, VR, I mean, you just look at it, I think, or you get into mixed reality, or you're looking at extended reality, that systems which are coming into play. It's amazing what is going to happen, whether one for your ISR capability, one is to wage war, one is to be able to execute battle, or in the contrary, threats that can be emanating from this kind of stuff. And when we look at the advanced space-based sensors, you're now looking at quantum. Micus, one of the ladies, the panelists had talked about, which had come in, was in 2016. Today they've got a terrestrial line which exists. They've got a link on quantum communications, which has moved across. They had a base station in Austria, starting one in China. So you've got challenges which have come up, which we will need to counter fast, if not As I said, it's not a matter of catching up, but we have to make sure that the asymmetry remains in such a manner that you can still wage and optimize the capacities that you have. I don't have to catch up with him in every space, but I need to be able to deter him in a lot of places. And as long as I'm doing the right stuff, I will be in the game as far as that is concerned. So, but this technology development, which has taken this era of robos, machine-augmented heroes, the machine-augmented heroes, the laser weapons, battles in space, they've all moved from storybooks into the real world. And I think all of you must have seen Kalki. Have you all seen Kalki? It addresses two fantastic facets which you have to see. This whole story of how technology has taken on, and the other threat which is coming up that I will talk about last, climate change. The impact of climate change which led to green oases becoming the area which you want to control. Are you getting my point? It actually signifies these two at the other extreme, which is what I hope at the end of 21st century it's not there. We won't be there, but I know the generation sitting behind will 100% be there. So we have to make sure that situation doesn't come. And how do we do that? But the issue that I also want to flag here with technology, because it's a large base of young people who are going to be tomorrow policymakers, part of corporates, part of decision-making structures in various organizations, I think is the social dimension. And if you have to look at the social and political dimension, I'd like to flag three things. The algorithmically driven social media connections transgress national boundaries. That's how you have people going and joining ISIS from different corners of the world on an ideology which they may or may not have understood. And some of them who've come back, as you have seen their interviews and the inputs that have come out, have shown that how misplaced were their foundation thinking of what they wanted, or the glory that they thought that was attached to it. So I think the biggest problem for developing worlds, where you still have the haves and the have-nots, and which will remain for a long time in India, our inclusive development is coming in, but you still have spaces where it's going to get exploited. The second aspect that I would like to talk about is that with the robotics coming into place, if we do not carry out, I would say, skill development and reskilling for people to move across, you actually would create an imbalance in the society. And this imbalance in society will cause ruptures, which will again disrupt your growth, which will become a challenge for your own internal security dimension. And what will happen? You will have leaders. I mean, if I have to take it in a different context, because of migration, Trump actually fueled up this Anglo-Saxon threat to their jobs, their livelihood, and has actually romped home with a fantastic majority. Yeah? So in France, the left opposition, even if it won, wasn't allowed to go because there was a thought. And in the same manner, today, if you have the social unrest created thanks to, by name, tomorrow by some man-machine company or an interface, you might just become the target. So I think we'll have to be very worried about the social impact of how technology gets harnessed for society, but do we have space, and how do we reskill these people to be actually part of the same system in a more effective manner? I think there's also a deeper dimension today to this whole transformation. I think there is a diffusion between the digital and the virtual space, synthetic and what is organic. I mean, this generative AI case, all of us are aware. I know out here, when in the initial stages, one of the, I think in one of the courts of one of the judges in America, this poor analyst has used generative AI to sort of prepare the notes for the lawyer, and suddenly he quoted a particular case where he said, it looks very good to have so-and-so versus state, so-and-so and so-and-so. So there were 3-4 examples given, and the judge said, I've never heard of this particular thing. And then it was found out subsequently that the generative AI model at that stage, which was before 4G, 4I, was that it had actually felt that to make his argument strong, he needs to have something like that planted inside it. So this synthetic, organic, how is it going to work? If I'm going to train my logarithms on synthetic data, I'm sorry, the baggage will carry. So we've got a challenge as far as the technology is concerned. Let me look at 2 or 3 other issues related with technology. The technological asymmetry can translate into geopolitical inequality. And I'll just give an example. The chip story everybody is aware of, but in 2010, Japan, the trade ships carrying to Japan restricted export of rare earths critical for computing, sensors, permanent magnets, and energy storage. This is in 2010. So you could start putting embargoes. So these critical elements that are required for now the new age weapon systems and the new age systems can then be weaponized like the weaponization of the economy, and that adds another dimension to how political objectives of nation states can be met without going to war, non-kinetic means. The other thing is the stabilization of the actual international security structure. though it is lethal and fast, there's no doubt with this new technology, but it demands a new relationship between the man and machine, which is what a soldier will have to adopt to. I mean, if I'm going to have an unmanned, the MUMT, when you talk manned, unmanned teaming, tomorrow if I'm going to be working in an environment where I have these robotic capacities and capabilities which can go in without threat of life to the people and human life, well, how do I operate with these guys? How do I function? That's the challenge that is going to come. The fear and uncertainty of asymmetry can increase the risk of conflict. Today I have a technological edge which China has. Tomorrow, if it feels it's going, it can take that thing of risk that today I am ahead of the loop. Should I take the chance now or not? So there is risk-taking capability and risk of conflict increases. Deterrence and preemption. I think today these technologies are easily available. Yeah? It's in the hand of non-state actors. It can be happen in any yard. Today, if you go into Noida, I see those sheds in sector 2 and 3. Every place there's somebody, an ex-DARPA student who started a startup who's looking at some facet or something which is related to these emerging technologies. It's so easily available, then how do you regulate it? How do you impose this thing without curbing the growth of mindsets, and I mean without developing of the future growth and development, and also harness it so that it doesn't become like a shooting in your own feet by allowing this to freely move out. So regulatory and capability of this becomes a problem, and any arms control in this is going to become very difficult, which is happening. I mean, what China is doing, these hyperglide vehicles that are coming in, the way he's moving into different spheres of activity, I'm sorry, there is nothing to check and balance that kind of check because there is no regulatory body that can bring it to task. So the technology players who are there, one is development, the second is to harness it correct, the other is the regulatory, and the fourth is the people like in the armed forces to utilize it. So how do I exploit these new age weapons coming into me, and how do I manage to play my conventional spectrum as well as this new age threats that are developing? I think the democratization of weaponizable technology is what has come into play. ISIS, if you recollect, when the breakup of the Soviet Union happened, there was this story about 100 black boxes, if you'd heard of. And they could trace about 96 of them, but they couldn't get the last 4. Finally, I think that happened a few years back. So those were the small, not literally TNWs, but I would say dirty bombs that could be created and utilized wherever you wanted to utilize it. But there was a control on it. But today, this weaponizable technology can be used anywhere. I mean, whether I use a drone sitting in here, I can send it up and I want to hit something somewhere, with whatever be my ulterior aim. Positive, negative, to facilitate an ideology or otherwise can happen. So it's getting very difficult to harness this kind of thing, and ethics and regulations are very difficult to impose in this particular case. I would last thing say that as far as technology is concerned, traditional means of the state to exercise oversight, legislate norms for development, regulation and lawmaking has become difficult, if not ineffective, as of now. How do we curtail this? Why I'm saying this is that this unharnessed growth will become a challenge for the soldier to keep abreast. And as any army that requires to fight on a conventional new age front, you will have to be able to have people who understand this technology and then can weave it into your tactical strategies or doctrines or activities or tactical actions that you have to take on the battlefield. I would like to state at the end is that the relative loss of state power fatally undermines the system of international security. There are loads of examples one can talk about it. But I'll leave that here. So, I mean, I thought the social political impact of technology needs to be understood by the younger generation, which is going to sort of come out and be instrumental at different levels. The third bucket list is weaponization of the cyber domain. I don't want to talk too much. We are used to cyber theft. We are used to cyber espionage. That APT 161372, which was there, which was taken out of how espionage happened by Chinese industry. And on this side, I must also share that in one of the track 2s I'd gone, so I was talking to the Chinese counterpart who had come in there. And so we talked about soft power. For 2 things he told me. So I said, you guys have been unethical. He says, sir, tell me in the world who's going to give you niche technologies if you go and ask him. He's not going to give it to you. That's his IPR. Yeah. He's not going to give it. So he says, we stole it. Then we modified it to be able to fit into our system. And today we are leading in all those areas. So I think, so he says, you guys are being stupid about it. I mean, that's the answer he gave us. Then he said about soft power. He said, what did it do with our soft power? We had all our people who were setting up in these various major high-end, high-tech institutions. They came back with their residual power inside, but the Indian diaspora goes there and stays in Silicon Valley. It doesn't come back, and then because you haven't provided the environment for that. So what you said is, we need to do a little bit of deep thinking. Can we manage to address these issues, or we can't manage to address these issues? Okay, weaponization of cyber domain, I think, has only made sure, and if you recollect, that last bit happened about 3 years back when the state SCADAs were put up for open tendering. And out of the 6 state SCADAs, there were 6 of them were by leading Chinese company. They had to be, the whole story had to be cancelled, and new norms had to be fitted so that they don't come in. So today, if he's controlling your distribution and system of the power thing, he can manage it. And how does he affect you here? If I have to mobilize from the hinterland to go and be ready at the battlefront along China, because there's lots of army which is deployed all over the place. We have to move on trains and we have to move by air. If today you hit these travel centers and you sort of dislocate a chain, I'm sorry, you're stuck. You won't be able to mobilize. So you create an imbalance of the force structures at the border. So how do I cater for that? And that's why a lot of forward deployments have happened of the Indian Armed Forces over a period of time to be able to cater for these kind of situations till we manage to have full immunity that it can still happen. So the first point of contact, there's enough resources lying there. Nobody can stop it till you build it up in the later man. So that's the challenge that comes in when you're looking at strategies and doctrinization. But most importantly with the cyber domain is this non-military and the non-attributability fact, but more importantly the influence operations. I think playing on your cognitive domain, why did we ban TikTok and places like these? Because he was understanding the mindsets of people across different sectors, different states, different ethnic grouping, different state structures, language groupings that we had in it. And he would be able to target them when he wanted to target and exploit it. I mean, you saw this famous WhatsApp after Muhammad Yunus, Dr. Muhammad Yunus was introducing at Clinton Foundation and said, meet these boys. They've been working behind the scenes. And what did they use? They used toolkits, which something similar to what Arab Spring was there. And in this interaction which I had 2 days, I asked one of the students, did you feel at some stage you got hijacked? He says, yes, sir, our whole model for what we had gone on the streets to change had changed, but by then it was hijacked. It became a different whole. It all became a political game which was controlled by powers other than those what were required to be in place. So to just keep the front, now every ministry, every interior has a student rep, but that is basically for a show window. But the answer is how it can be exploited. And when I talk about this misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, I mean fake news, you're seeing it. I mean, we've just gone through an election phase, and I'm sure it just happened again before Maharashtra and Jharkhand. You've got enough videos which seem to be doctored and which couldn't be the truth. How do you tackle this? Just to give an example, like I would say for an institution in our army, in my units, we had said, you get anything which speaks derogatory or which talks about which you feel is against the norm that would have happened, please have one central agency where you share it with them. Let them check it and then take out a narrative in time. So maybe that's what should be done. Don't offer. And the other bit of advice everybody keeps giving you. But I think, look at the larger aim of cognitive faculties. You look at these 2 Hollywood movies that came out, Shang-Chi and The Legends of the Ten Rings in 2021. This was Marvel's first Asian-led superhero. And all these superheroes had Chinese characteristics. So what is he changing? With his young kids who play with Marvel in America, that 10 years from now, he doesn't look at the Chinese as people who have intruded into his society and created problems, but are the superheroes who are saving the world. Are you seeing the mindset that is changing? The smart city and all this, I would say it's been a great effort. This path, or Kartavya path, the Rajpath being named. What is it? If my grandson comes today from Australia, I tell him, what is this Kartavya path? And he tells, oh, this is the path of duty. Look at it, how you're linking it to your civilizational. So this change that is happening in the cognitive domain was with a narrative and with a focus as far as China is concerned. And that's the reason we had to ban a large number of these things which were carrying into it. And you all know about what Cambridge Analytica did when first Trump won and Hillary Clinton's case, how it happened. I mean, you all are aware of it. So I'm saying the worry is in this influence operation. The last is space militarization. I'll talk about space militarization as the ISR and the clarity, transparency that has come in. Today you've got military satellites, LEO, MEOs coming into place. I mean, the area is clouded. You saw you had a complete blanket sanction on Ukraine which couldn't communicate, and suddenly you had the Starlink given by Armin Flint from Elon Musk, and they were in communication. So the units were happening. So things are changing with this militarization of space, both communications and the methodology of how you can operate. But what are the other areas? Rise of China, everybody's talked about. I think there's enough that's been done. But the answer is that it has given him the capacity to do non-contact warfare, long-range engagements, and it also to be able to do what is a non-linear hybrid war, that it works in the domains of cyber and space, denies you the eyes that you think are available to you from space, denies you the communication linkages at the critical time. How do you cater for all this? How do you ensure that your network-centric operations continue in the manner that you want them to function? So then you need these LEOs and MEOs and space that is coming up. So you require, so this whole story is creating an area which can be weaponized. One rogue satellite can knock off a full chain out there, and then that rubble can create problems. So how do we deal with all these? So that's the challenge that is coming up. The next three I'm just going to flag, and then we'll leave it out for question and answer. Non-state actors. I said, I mean, J&K, we've been fighting this proxy war for the last 2.5 decades. Pakistan has placed it below the threshold. The Kargil war started off as a proxy war. And they said people from Northern Light Infantry, and they had these people who came in into the Mujahideens, as they said, who came and occupied. And later on, you found out when finally the areas were recaptured, that you found these dead bodies which had markings of NLI, which these people had utilized. So something like what the Wagner group did in Russia, which nearly took off and went rogue. So that's a security threat again for a nation. But what he was able to do, it used that Wagner group to carry out his instrument, the Russian instrument, to be able to engage in Africa and different parts of the world without attributability to the state. So we are well aware of it. So this is an area of these non-state actors becoming bigger than life. ISIS became bigger than life. It became a nation state, which had to be. The Boko Haram is still running wild. I don't know what will happen to it out there if it doesn't grow up. So we have challenges. We have to look at that. Internal fissures, I think for all developing countries, especially India, are the social inequalities that exist. And this is something which will remain in our security. If I have to fight a battle on the borders, and if my backside is not protected, I cannot fight here. Because I'm worried about both sides, and that's the tragedy of how you do your strategies. You try and do tactics to do your maneuvers to be able to defeat him from different directions. So I think we'll have to be very careful about the social fissures that exist. We need to make sure that the socio-ethno-religious examples are taken into check. We talk about water wars. We are both, Bangladesh, India, are all lower riparian states. Today, we've done some agreements for some 12 rivers. We've done a Ganga water training. Have we been able to get anything from the Chinese? No, it hasn't. But what happened of the floods that happened when the Gaggar broke and very full water bodies that came right down the line was because we had no clue of what was happening. They're not even sharing information. Now they're diverting water. The story is that Xinjiang is being utilized subsequently to become their semiconductor hub. They require more water. Is that water being diversified, which will have an impact? Fortunately for us, that a large number of, we do get some amount of water which can come in for devastation, but there's a large amount of water which comes up because we're part of the Himalayan foothills, so a lot is generated here. If today the Brahmaputra, what comes in across maybe just 20% of the Sangpo river, the rest 80% comes in from within our own countries, the rains and waters. So I think it's not that challenging, but the issue is water wars is going to become very, very critical. And the last thing is the climate change issue, I said. Today, as far as Bangladesh is concerned, they have laid out call it the Mujib plan and the Delta plan. And they look at by the later half of this century, about 20 million climate migrants. Where are these 20 million climate migrants going to go? I mean, they can't go into those boats and get to Australia. So they're going to come here. So how are we going to tackle with it with a country that is like this? So what I'm trying to say is the armed forces today will have to be careful of how you tailor yourself. So you require to be conscious of the changes in the geopolitical spectrum so that your dynamic changes happen, the new age technology that comes in, how to harness it with your own legacy equipment, because you can't get everything new on the platter. So as we say, 30% new age, 30% current, and 40% is generally equipment going to obsolescence. So that's how armies can equip themselves. So this is happening out there. And if you're going to get threats in the climate space, you're going to get threats in the non-state actors, you're looking at internal fissures which you might have to control if you have to operate outside, are all challenges which come in. So in this, I would say, rather gloomy setup, which is what this challenges was, let me assure you that at the end of the day, it's the man behind the gun who matters like hell. And thank God for it, that is where we survived. And what happened in Galwan, it was, we made a strategic move by occupying Kailash range. And there are enough indicators that show that 4 battalion commanders of the Chinese refused to go in for attack because they said, we can't get to the top. We'll get shot while going up. So there was a refusal. That's how Kailash range got dominated. And if you see, but leverages have to be created, and leverages have that much of leverage. They cannot rectify the undoing all along the border, which has happened over the last 70 years. So I think leverages can be utilized and should be done. So when we look at that, and today when you look at China, his capacity of non-contact warfare, long-range missile capability which he's developed without having to come in contact does put a certain challenge for us, that our survivability and battlefield survivability and protection needs to be enhanced. So that is to be vectored into how you're strategizing and how your doctrines work. And the second biggest thing is, I think somewhere down the line, our media will have to get more mature on what it should report and what it shouldn't. Because reporting, uncharted and unfettered reporting creates emotional hype, and emotional hype in democratic elected countries creates an emotional imbalance for the political leadership to take decisions. So that's a challenge that will come in. So somewhere down the line, our media will have to look at harnessing its own ethics and values to try and make sure that they don't define and create instability which could be there. And I think what better place, the issues that I've talked about, when you look at what has happened in the Russia-Ukraine war. What started off in 2010 when Poroshenko and Yuroshenko was changed over. The Euromaidan riots when they were going to sign the FTA with Europe, with EU, and then they finally amalgamated and agreed to do it with Russia. Then when the Black Sea Fleet came up, was coming into Odessa, the NATO Partnership for Peace, they decided to take on Crimea. How did he use those green berets and irregulars to show that there was no military there, but there was an uprising within the people in that area that it needed to be taken. So those are all issues. And thereafter you've seen, as what I think the professor in the morning categorically said, military's drive. I mean, we suddenly had these drones coming in. What has the Russians done? They've just made a mesh of normal wire mesh to ensure that that drone doesn't come and hit your tank here. So it's a stupid thing which has been innovated on the ground. So tomorrow, if you're looking at loiter munitions and things coming in, they have created this little bit of a thing which didn't require too much of innovation. It was cheap and it was easily doable. So in this era of, as I say, small, smart, many, and financially plausible weapon platforms, the armed force will have to be thinking on the feet. And this is where training and military leadership will have to go through. And what you talk about, our training, revolutionary in military affairs is not only there, organizational changes are there, but it's the mindset that has to change. The capacity of a leader to be able to stand on the feet, think, and be able to talk. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'll end, and I will only say Jai Hind, look forward to it, and I think a big round of applause for all the people who are sitting here at this stage, because if I was in your place, I would have gone and sort of walked out from here some time back. But thank you very much for staying, and absolutely a pleasure to speak to all of you. God bless.
Thank you, General, for that tour de force of the challenges that we need to prepare for. I think we have time for about 3-4 questions. So I will let my own prerogative slide, and I'll ask the audience to.
Sir, my name is Vineet. I'm doing a PhD here at Manipal. My topic is on climate diplomacy. So I was really fascinated with the talk that you gave. And I just wanted to ask about, you talked about how the militarization of India and how India should expand and like how it should counter these challenges that China poses. But from your viewpoint and from the military itself, how do you see resource constraint? Because the way China has it, they are a leader in critical minerals, they are processing critical minerals, and the country itself is huge, and they're endowed with the resources which are marketable and which are saleable and which they are able to supply to the global economy. India is not that well resource endowed to take on such a machine. So in that context, how do you see resource, the resource crunch or the resource deficit that India faces in terms of what China has as a part of this whole military calculus going forward? Thank you.
Thank you for the speech, sir. My name is Rucha and I am a second year master's student at the department. Sir, you emphasized on the increasing role of violent non-state actors on the security. But when it comes to technology and security, non-violent non-state actors like private business sectors are also significant. So, sir, my question is that with reference to recent developments in the US, what do you think would be the implications of non-violent non-state actors formally and officially becoming a part of the government on security? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's delighted to see the kind of research the young people are doing today. I think what you're saying is absolutely right. For a democratic country like India, where we've got challenges of what goes into security, what goes into social development, what goes into infrastructure development, how do you make sure that resources are shared? So the bottom line is absolutely right. There'll always be a resource crunch. You will not get what you want. But I think what is required is this Make in India defense, which has actually helped, is that it gives you bigger bang for the buck. If it cost me 10 to get it, today I can get it for 1. And I'll give you an example. I'm also an advisor to Tata Aerospace and Defense. So the loiter munition, which we used to buy for 3.5 crores, we provided it for 31 lakhs. So just look at what the disparity was. Today we are making guns of ours, which are going to be produced here in the next, that's what's around the corner in the next 2-3 years. You cut down your bill. So what is happening is, if there is Indian defense industry which comes up, which is what this Make in India defense has done, one is you get better bang for your buck. The second thing is, do not get that, how do I tackle it? That's why I said, I have to take, he has the capacity to reach non-contact, long range with precision. How do I deal with it? So I change my doctrinal and strategies of ensuring there's protection and there is battlefield survivability as a key element with whatever I have in legacy and whatever comes in. How do I do it? You've seen it for aircrafts. You generally make these beautiful shelters in which the aircrafts are parked, and which China has done now across the border. Because on the Tibetan plateau, how does he do that? There are no trees, there are no wedges where he can do it. So he's created those. We have done the same for most of our resources. We are looking at wherever there is a possibility in the hilly terrain is to drive your vehicles into it so that they're not out and easily accessible for non-contact. Because as I said, the worry here is that if tomorrow there are 10 photographs of people being hit, there'll be political mayhem out here. So because that's, in our case, it'll be the ticker war that will kill us. Not really. So that's where I think the media will have to be more mature in what it reports and what it doesn't report. Let the political hierarchy know it, but let not an emotional hype be created about the devastation that is caused. So, and to give an example of how do you deal with it, he has the capacity to lead out. We took out the Akash 5. The medium-range ballistic missile. I can hit Beijing. I have 10 of them. He might have 1,000 of them. Are you getting my point? So I've created this. The asymmetry doesn't remain in that space. So today, if he's got 1,000 satellites which are giving him all the communication, if I can have 2 or 3 LEOs or a constellation of LEOs, which is coming round the corner, and we've already got this Airtel, and I mean even Tata's got after launching the satellite, they've got 17 satellites from this particular thing, and you have the capacity to be able to communicate directly. So what is required is small measures that can defeat the asymmetry that existed in that space. And our biggest capacity, I think today, the best thing the US election has done, you can be sure for the next 5 years, he's not going to war with us here, till Trump has got their goat. So they have got a trade war, they've got to deal with it at those levels. So he's got a challenge to deal with. And maybe that was one of the reasons why he looked at doing rapprochement and agreeing to talk with it, and agree to this. I mean, he's looking for another market. Yeah, where does he go? If he's going to increase and hike those rates, which Trump has threatened to do so, where does he look for market? 1.4 billion, 900 million people of the lower middle class, the whole of population of Europe and America. Yeah, that's India. So today, how does he lose out? So I think that is one of the reasons, not the only reason, I would say. So I think when you're looking at resources, what we are doing is we are optimizing our resources. We are dual-tasked our resources to function. I have a threat on Pakistan, I have a threat on China. I have a footprint there, so if today I had to keep my logistic nodes, I don't create logistic nodes with everything on one side. I have distributed the two with something in the center. So what happens on the show window and the front gives me the timeline to be able to build it up. So I think that's how you would look at it. So your strategies, doctrines, your methodologies of deployments will all change, and that is how we will have to beat it. And I think the best bet that we have today is here. Nobody in the world has soldiers and honed skills like what we have in human resource here. It's absolutely the greatest battle-winning factor in the world here. So he avoids non-contact. We ensure that we have contact. That's the way to defeat it. Thank you. And you're coming on to yours, sorry, Miss, could you just once again tell me what was the question you asked here? I did write down. Non-violent? Oh, with the coming of Trump. Yeah, so I think, let's be clear, nothing is going to come easy for you as well. Huh? But the issue is that it's going to be equally difficult, if not more difficult, for China to get it. We've got some kind of linkages which have established now with the various ICCS agreements, the various things of Quad. There's a great bonhomie, and I keep saying bonhomie between political leadership helps things move faster. Just to give an example, the AUKUS nuclear submarine technology, which had to be given and get clearances from the US, has taken 6 years. Whereas the G404 came out in 8 months. So I think priorities will have to happen. Finally, when it materializes for us, is a different story. But the issue is the barriers that get created can be overcome or can be created and become more stiffer. And I think that is what is going to happen with Trump coming there. We will have a certain advantage that there will be more problems for that gentleman, but he's not going to look at climate change, which it says is a waste of time. So as far as these COPs are concerned, thank you very much. We better do it ourselves. How do we generate climate finance, look at climate justice? All these areas are not going to be there. So there are some goods and there are some bads. The good part is the next 4 or 5 years, you have time to catch up on some of the asymmetries. Thank you.
General, I wish the AUKUS submarines also come to us. If they're clever enough, they would be giving it to us as well. I just want to add a point to what the gentleman there raised in terms of resource constraints, and it speaks to what you said as well. The man in the machine actually matters much more than almost anything else. And that was proven in the Himalayas, right? When in June 2020 and August 2020, when we went and took up the Kailash ranges, right? Everybody kept saying, "Oh, China is 5 times bigger than India's economy. They have a larger military. They have more equipment. All of that stuff. Great, fantastic. But who has better troops trained to fight in those heights? That matters, right?" Resource constraint need not always be in terms of the economy. I mean, Paul Kennedy's theory is great, but it need not apply in all sorts of situations. It depends also on your tactics and strategies, right? Today, North Korea, which is, the kind of resources that it has, is supplying troops, ammunition, weaponry to a former superpower. Could you imagine this world 20 years ago? I don't think so, right? It speaks to a lot of what you said as well. Therefore, if the man in the machine and the power of the human mind is much more important than almost anything else, China is going to face a huge problem, right, in terms of demographic decline. To his idea on resource constraints, China grew in good times, right? When it had a demographic boom, right? It came to a point where there were 15 youngsters who were looking after one elderly person, right? So that's the kind of demographic dividend they had. They grew during that time. But in the next 10 years, that thing is reversing in a typically Chinese dramatic fashion, right? It is going to be 2 young people who will have to look after every elderly person in China. That's a huge loss of demographic, power for a country of that size and of that ambition. We, on the other hand, are demographically blessed if only we can train and skill our people to to make use of that. That was the point I wanted to make.
After that Kailash Range episode, they've tried to enroll Tibetans into the PLA. And they've tried their damnedest, but they've been able to get about 4,000 people. They've created 5 companies, but they haven't been able to meet their mark. So after the initial bit of euphoria where some of them came in, they got about 5 companies, about 180 in each of them. That's what he's been able to create across various spectrums. But the worry now is that there's a lot of, with the problem in Nepal and with the Gurkhas, with the policy that we've adopted as of now of the Agniveer, we might actually have a lot of these Gurkhas who are going to go and start joining the Chinese army. And that's a worry, and that's something which we have flagged, which needs to be looked at, because then they are tough guys. Yeah? So for them, they're climbing mountains on this side or on the other side will remain the same. So that's a challenge that's coming up now.
Is that the 21st challenge in your list? If there are no other questions, actually we are over time, so we, if there are no other questions, then we can end this session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think for all those who are sitting here, and it's been a real long day, and thank you to the young research fellows and all the student faculty here. It's outstanding. Thank you very much. Delighted. Any questions, anybody who has, you're welcome to connect with me on mail, chat, and thank God for the technologies. You can now even do a WhatsApp video call if you have to chat together, so it's not a problem.
Thank you, Chair and General, for the insightful and thought-provoking words. Now, I invite Dr. Chari to present a token of gratitude to the Chair and the keynote speaker. I also request the Chair and keynote speaker to gather for the photo session. With that, we have come to the end of the day 1. I thank all of you, distinguished scholars and participants, for making this event successful on the day 1. Thank you everyone.